We've always believed in a better world. In 2006, we were the first media company to go carbon neutral, cutting our emissions and offsetting the rest. Now, we're going much further. This time, we're not just tackling Sky's emissions, we're launching Sky Zero, our 10-year plan to be net zero carbon by 2030. Net zero means doing zero harm to the planet through carbon emissions. We'll cut emissions created by people using Sky, by our suppliers, and by our business by at least 50%. We're making all our tech products more energy efficient. We're developing the world's most sustainable film and TV studios. We'll make every Sky original production, TV channel, show and film net zero carbon. We'll transform our 5,000 vehicles to create a zero emissions fleet. We'll plant trees, mangroves and seagrass to absorb the carbon we can't cut, yet. And we'll use our voice to call for change and inspire millions of people to go zero. Because the world can't wait. Sky, believe in better.
Well, a very warm welcome to the Edinburgh TV Festival. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by the Sky Chief Exec, Jeremy Darroch. Today we'll be exploring why Sky has decided to become net zero carbon in 2030, what the challenges are to the media industry, both with COVID-19 and the climate crisis, and what role content can play to help us understand more about climate crisis and, importantly, how to change hearts and minds. So, Jeremy, your grandfather was a coal miner. Mm-hmm. And here you are today spearheading a green new future. You've set some very ambitious targets for 2030 for Sky. What do you think have been the pivotal moments in your life that have motivated you in terms of your vision and your actions?
I think in terms of pivotal moments, there's probably only two or three actually I think that really have done it. Actually, the first one you talked about my grandfather. I suspect actually right at the outset there was some of that there. When you grow up in essentially a rural community, I think, or one of the things I always felt was this kind of connection with the community and the land in its broader sense. When I was probably 18, 19 and they closed the mines in the northeast, there was the right and wrongs of that decision, but what I always remember was that nothing came afterwards. And I think it was my first experience of when you lose something that you rely and depend upon, and when it goes away, there can be really quite profound implications. My father's generation, my dad didn't work down the pit, but a lot of his friends did, and essentially they never worked again, pretty much. And so I think that definitely had an impression on me. I then was very lucky that my early career was spent at Procter & Gamble. It was a very special time at P&G. The people I worked with were some of the best people I've ever worked with. Many of them have gone on to do similar things that I've done and been successful. But there it was the first time I really got exposed to some of the conundrums and the trade-offs in terms of how you grow a business. So if you take a business like laundry, for example, one of the reasons that business has grown, of course, is because we all wash our clothes so much more today than we ever used to. And that was actually how we grew the market. If you take a product like a disposable diaper, it's a wonderful product that is so much more convenient, helps the lives of young mums, protects babies better, all of that stuff, but has real issues around things like landfill and how do you dispose of it. So I really got exposed to some of those trade-offs that you have to make. And I think early on in my career, that got me to think about that was the case. And then when I got a chance to run Sky, inevitably in those moments, or in a sense, you've been working for that opportunity your whole life. And so I was very aware of this idea that Sky both could be, and I wanted it to be, just more than the kind of narrowness of the business. It could stand for something more, and it could be a more responsible business and could be aware of its broader impact. And certainly at the time I had, a young family, all the team actually had a young family. I think that definitely affected us all, and we wanted to do something that was not just good business, but was a good business, if you see what I mean. So they probably are the things I think that affected me more than anything.
And just picking up, obviously, the sort of first ambition with the carbon neutral at Sky, both in terms of new technologies, looking for kind of carbon efficiencies with the Sky Q box, and then also kind of changing behaviours here within the culture. What has surprised you most, both in terms of the challenges and also the successes?
Well, I think when you actually get into, when you set bold targets or very different targets in terms of what the business is going to seek to achieve, you have to be very definite. So at the time, becoming carbon neutral felt like a very, very big step for us. Some of the work we did in the rainforest felt like a big step. Of course, it quite quickly gets you into, well, where is the biggest impact that you have today? And for us, the biggest impact is in customers' homes. The amount of electricity, essentially, that our products use in customers' homes would account for something like 50 to 60% of our total emissions. So you have to be bold then in terms of the interventions that you're seeking to make, and you have to have the confidence to be bold and be somewhat declarative with the business around what we're going to do. That has then led to a whole sea change of activity throughout Sky. That is actually not just about Sky, but essentially about the broader supply base that we have. Sky is it's a reasonably big business, but when you start to think of all the things that we impact and all the people we work with, it really becomes very, very big. So I think the first thing that kind of jolted me, or I realised, is that you had to be, as I say, very, very definite. But then I realised that there are so many people who want to make a difference. There were so many people in the business who didn't really need convincing, they just needed enabling. There were so many of our suppliers who quickly signed up and said, we're going to be part of that. Some of our component suppliers, the assemblers, where we put our products together, a business like Unipart, straight away wanted to be part of that journey and to play a role. And so actually what happened, a little bit like pushing a boulder down a hill, you kind of got to get the thing moving, but very quickly it started to take on a sort of life of itself and a momentum of its own. And really we've just tried to build on that and keep resetting our horizon every few years so that we keep that whole journey going. Yeah.
And what gives you that confidence to kind of achieve that ambitious target for 2030?
I think, a bit of success. I think success always breeds confidence. So, and it can be a very powerful tool in the business because, of course, now we can look back and say, well, if we did it there, we can do it here. Yep. And so you don't really have to lay out so much the rationale for people. You just, because people can turn to that and see it. So I think that's the first thing. I think, secondly, probably more than anything, I think Sky still at its heart. We're a sort of bunch of doers. We like to solve problems. We tend to get bogged down a bit when we get stuck in sort of strategy and theory. We like to solve things on the go and get going. Yeah. So I think it plays very much with the culture and the beat of the business, which is, let's decide what the problem is and then let's just start trying to solve it. And then the other nice thing I think about it is that, if we are here today saying, right, by 2030 we're going to be net carbon zero, and then eventually, we're going to be hopefully carbon positive as a business. But actually, you can mine success all the way along that journey. So it's not a case where you have to wait 10 years and say, right, we've done it. It's literally along that journey, there's incremental improvement that you can tap into and build upon, and it gives you a lot of dividends when you're doing the work. Yeah.
And sort of just looking at the wider industry which we're all living in at the moment with the heartbreak of the COVID-19 crisis, clearly you've been building this momentum exactly like you said, and that's breeding kind of more buy-in, both in terms of customers and your employees. But do you think the financial impact of the COVID-19 is going to have an impact in terms of your initiatives that you've mapped out for the carbon neutral initiatives that you're continuing to drive? Yeah.
It's a real concern. So I think the first thing is you've got to be very sort of present around where you are. I think often the job at the top of the business is to understand when you're on track or when you have to divert a little bit, but very, very importantly, understand how you're going to get back on track. So we are not going to change our aspirations, our goals, and our plans. In fact, I would say that they're even more important, and I feel even more energized today than I ever did to make that happen. Now, in the real world of dealing with COVID, and we've got to put people into customers' homes, and they need to be protected. That's the most important priority. They need PPE, they need face masks, and So, you know, for a short term, we've probably had more single-use plastic, for example, than we would like by a long way. So we've got to figure that out. We are figuring that out. But I think it's really, really important that we as a business and then everybody else does not lose sight. The environmental imperative is not going away. And actually COVID, I think, is a real reminder to us all of the outcome or what can happen when, you know, the infrastructure of the planet gets out of balance and things go wrong. And I think often, you know, generally in this area, when we talk about sort of natural science, quite often we talk about other species, and we use the impact on the planet or species decline, for example, which sometimes is one step removed from a real human impact. Well, you know what, for the last 3 months, we have seen, you know, the white heat of human impact. So we better internalize that, I think, and do something about it.
Given that you've been on this journey now with your colleagues for 15 years, clearly you've learnt a lot on the way. What would be the insights, what would you share with your fellow industry leaders, as well as the production communities sort of listening today, in terms of the learnings that would be most valuable to them in terms of shaping their choices?
Well, look, I think first of all, as an issue for our industry to lead on, I think in one sense it's almost the perfect issue. You know, relatively our own carbon footprints would typically be quite small if you think of them in the broader spectrum of sort of business and impact. So we're not big mining companies. We don't have typically very large operational footprints. So actually, I think relatively it's an issue that we can all act upon, and have an effect on, because it's reasonably controllable, I think. And then the second thing is, I think it's an issue that is so relevant to voice and the power of our industry's collective voice. I don't think we really appreciate how powerful that could be. So I think, you know, that's very our to all of us in the industry as well. And that's sort of been our experience as we've really sought to engage with our customers, to use our broadcast channels in all of their shape and form, to use the great marketing machine of Sky to communicate. You know, we've found that we can really change or drive engagement and change people's behaviors. So we use the phrase a lot in Sky now, an idea of sort of from inspiration to participation. And this idea that we can inspire, engage with people, inform them, and then that can lead to them getting more involved and changing their behavior, I think is the most powerful thing. And I've learned that a lot, more than I thought, that if anything has proved to be easier than I thought at the outset. And then the final thing, which has been a huge positive, is just how that's had a positive impact internally. And how employees, you know, I think if you talk to most Sky employees, it would be one of the things that they are proudest about when they talk about our business. The fact that we have a point of view, that we act upon that point of view, and that we don't just talk about it. We know that change starts at home, and that we have to be the change that we want to see ourselves, and we are unequivocal on that, and that we try and drive it through our business every day. So I think the goodwill you can get from employees can be very strong. So it can help your employee brand, I think, as well as the broader contribution that you make with customers. And
of all the topics, quite uniting as
very
well,
much so.
Rather than dividing, which is...
I mean, if you know, to me, the idea of any business, anyway, the idea that we're a part of any form of collective, big or small, it has this sort of sense of mission, you know, underneath it, you know, however we articulate it, this sense of sort of togetherness. And actually people who work at Sky, we all work for some core reasons that attract us to Sky, and the same thing will be true in, you know, your company or ITV or Channel 4, and they may all be slightly different, but actually there's something that draws people to organisations. And I think this is can be one of those things that pulls together people who broadly share similar values and have often the same mindset. So it's a bit like a stream, you know, it's the easiest way is to be in the flow of the stream, not try to cut across it. And it feels to me this could be part of the flow of the stream of this industry, I would hope.
And great to be at Edinburgh discussing it as one of those topics that we're all here together, whether we're a production community, freelance producer, right through to a CEO of an industry, that the bigger goal sits above everybody, rather than it being a competitive thing, which often drives kind of...
I think that's really true. You know, I think so much of kind of business life is often that, the competition, the sort of short-term fight for who's up, who's down, who's winning, who's losing, who's got the eyeballs, all that sort of stuff. But the idea of why we can't unite and work on things together, I think is very powerful. One of the things that I also do is I chair an organisation called Business in the Community. And we've done a lot of research with people generally about how they think about business, and big business in particular, but business generally. And what comes back consistently all the time are three things. The first thing is they want to see businesses do more for young people.
Yep.
And I think this idea of, you know, the next generation, you know, our age group has sort of been the golden generation, and we've had so much given to us, largely for free, and we've had almost unlimited resource and the ability to do so many things. So what happens to the next generation? So they'll talk a lot about that. The second thing people will talk about is the environment. Just discreetly. People get it, they understand it, they live it every day. You know, they can appreciate and understand climate change and air quality and biodiversity decline very, very well. And then the third thing, and I think is often the most interesting piece, is they want to see businesses work together. They're slightly tired, I think, of this idea of businesses sort of only doing their own thing and sort of seeking to get advantage in these areas because they are bigger than business. So I think if you can combine some of those things, if we can be seen to work together towards a common goal as opposed to an individual goal, I think that's a very, very powerful thought for people. And I think it's one of the ways that we can also help to just start to reset some of the perception around business, that we're not always just in it for ourselves. Yeah. That we can be in it for a greater good, and actually we can compete, but we can work together at the same time. And you know, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, for a shared goal, why not?
Correct.
and sort of looking at that, then looking at from a government perspective, which obviously has the overarching view, their targets are set for 2050.
Yes.
Do you feel they could be doing more to support the media sector in these initiatives? And if so, where would you kind of put the spotlight to help drive change quicker, given that there is a clock ticking in that regards?
My experience, I have to say, is a bit different. I think all of the interactions I've had with ministers for different governments over many years is that they really want to make a difference. They want to make a change. But they often don't really know how to be effective, and they can't do it in a vacuum. And I think, you know, we often see when policy is set as a vacuum, how ineffective it can be. So I think it's incumbent upon us to step into that and seek to help government rather than expect government always just to come to us in business to help them provide smarter solutions and smarter policy. And I think, you know, if we don't do that, policy will get made in a bit of a vacuum, and then, you know, we'll not be that happy about it. Well, you know, we've got to roll our sleeves up, I think, and engage more. Personally, I'd like to see us as a nation go a bit faster than 2050. It feels quite a long time away for me, and set some targets that are even faster than that. But they've got to be backed up by the right plans that give us a reasonable hope we're going to be able to do it, because, you know, we've not been short of big declarations in the environmental area. What we've been short of is the actions to back those up, you know, to get to the goals. So we've got COP26 now is next year. I think that's a big opportunity for business. It's going to be a big showcase here in the UK. What a great opportunity for many of us to show, you know, what we're going to be doing in support of our national goal. Yeah. And use that as a big statement about the UK and business in the UK. I think it would be a great opportunity for everyone. Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about how Sky and other organisations have done technological innovation to get carbon usage down, how we can change our behaviours. But of course, most of us come to work to make films, great content. And it'd be great just to get your thoughts on the power really of content to be used in a proactive way to sort of obviously educate, inform, but ultimately how to change hearts and minds.
Yes.
And the value of that as we all kind of venture on this journey.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's the golden key to the golden door, right? It's, you know, if you stand back from our industry, still people are consuming, you know, I don't know how many hours of TV, you know, each and every day. On the whole, most of us, you know, have reasonably predictable schedules. You know, we kind of go to work or do what we do, and and then we watch TV in the evening, you know, and or we watch our iPad or our iPhone, and we're consuming content. So this is a great way for us all to engage and use what we're great at and our skills to bring that to life. I think we've got to be more definite as an industry on some of the conundrums and choices and stark realities. I mean, if I would be, I know you've spoken on this, if I would be, you know, critical a bit on some nature programming, I think too often it's a phrase, bleach out, you know, some of the environmental impacts. And I think we've got to be more definite on that. From our point of view, that's one of the reasons why, you know, Sky News, for example, you firmly believe that this is one of the big news stories for the next 20, 30 years, and have taken such a position to explore the consequence of environmental change in all of its forms. Sky News is a trusted, impartial news authority that investigates the stories that really matter. You have got absolute certainty, you know, to go after that, and I know that's one of their intentions to do that. We've recently launched Sky Nature, which fortuitously, I think, we launched just at the start of lockdown, and we've certainly seen a kind of a desire among customers to engage in the natural world and to understand that a bit more. So we're very pleased with the results that we've got through Sky Nature, and of course that can showcase a lot of our own programming, but it also can showcase programming for others. And then we're going to be working with Steve Batchell on a lot of new programming, and so I think it's just a great way for us to refresh, to engage, to inform people, and it's what we're good at, you know. So why wouldn't we push ever harder into that? And that can be part of our contribution, and we can combine this idea of a social good together with a business good at the same time.
Why do you think it can be such a challenge to communicate something which can feel carbon, feels quite intangible in many regards? What's your thoughts in terms of how to kind of use content in that way to kind of shift hearts and minds?
Even that took a while to understand really what does this idea of net carbon zero actually mean, and what doesn't it mean, and then what's in and what's out. So you're just not going to win that argument with people. We have to, I think, simplify the argument, and then we have to make it relevant to people. You know, if you took an environment like coaching, for example, the most effective coaching works when it's situational, when people can understand what it is they're seeking to change and relate to where they are today. And I think it's true in this area as well. You know, we've got to make it much more relevant to people so that then they can contextualize it better. And I think if stuff is perhaps a little bit too bland, you know, just another program off the block, or it's too technical, we just know in today's world people just aren't going to engage with that. So I think we have to, you know, make it a lot more relevant to people. I mean, I think for me, one of the interesting ideas is really starting to understand much better about the effects of environmental change on local communities. You know, what does it actually mean at a sort of very local level, and what impacts is that's having. I know that's something that Sky News has started to explore more. So I think it's our job to bring it to life for people, to make it relevant to people. And I think when we do that and make it engaging, then people will engage with it.
And I think maybe one of the very few positives, obviously, with the COVID-19 has been that opportunity for people to go out for their daily walks and connect with the nature in their backyard. Yeah. And I know as a programme maker, a big motivation for me is when I get letters from people saying, I live in the top of a multi-storey block of flats, I can't go out tonight, you took me diving with whales. Yeah. And you think, perfect. That's why we do it. And also in terms of reducing travel and things like that, ways to kind of enhance people's lives in
Yeah.
terms of perhaps mental well-being and enjoyment.
Yeah.
The power of what nature can do as a force for good,
Yeah.
alongside the crisis of the climate and the COVID.
I agree.
Perhaps
Yeah.
there's a sort of a role for it
Well, I think,
in a mainstream way.
If you look at just COVID, there's clearly been some very, very bad things there, but it's undoubtedly been good for the environment.
Yep.
You know, and we've all experienced it, and people have, you know, you talk, almost anybody will talk about it. So I think that one of the ways that you can think about that is sort of using that element of this experience, capturing that and not losing it. I mean, how sad would it be if we all go back to, you know, spending 2 hours a day, you know, sitting in a car on the way to work, you know, pouring emissions out into the environment. That can't be right. So there's always, I think, the opportunity to, in whatever experience we go through, to pick things that we want to change. And I don't see why COVID should be any less than that. And I certainly know that anybody who's you know, been out for a walk, or just, I mean, the number of people who talk about enjoying London in a different way, or being out in the countryside, or whatever, you know, have just had a little window and an insight into perhaps a world that's running just not quite as hot as it used to run. And I think if we can all reflect upon that and think about that and change because of that, that will be a good thing. I certainly know myself. You know, I've thought a lot about just things like my own travel schedule. And you know, the amount of travel that I've sort of imposed upon myself, and suddenly you realise that much of that can fall away. The trick will be to keep it away and change the way that, you know, you kind of work and live a little bit. And of course, you know, in one sense that can appear small, but if we all do that, you know, if we all just make a little change, you know, you'd be surprised at how that can aggregate over time.
And in terms of the wider industry, is there any more sort of key things that you would recommend that collectively we target to bring about the change as quickly as possible? Yeah.
Look, I would love us to just have an open book mindset. Yeah. You know, anything that we have done at Sky, if it's helpful, relevant, is there for others to, you know, to mine, to use, to learn from. And particularly, you know, if there are if perhaps smaller businesses that don't have the resource we have, you know, if we can help, then we'd like to do that. And I think if we can all create a culture of sharing, of openness, you know, perhaps a sense of, you know, if we could ever get there, a mission for the industry to use our voice and be a leader in this change. Because when all's said and done, you know, the battle for the environmental health of the planet is the thing that's going to define our generation. We've had so many things we've got for free, and now is the time, you know, to accelerate our action. And I know it can sound tired, because we've been saying this for a while now, but we have to do it, and it's down to all of us to play our part. So I think if this can be something, if you can take one thing and say, you know, there's no competition on this. This is just trying to get everybody, you know, to the next level. And if we can all do our bit, then, you know, I think we'll all look back at it and say, well, you know, when we had a chance to impact things, we impacted things, not just in our own backyard, but we helped others impact things in their backyard too.
Yeah. So really it's that balance, isn't it, by having, in order to earn the ongoing freedom of choice, which we all value enormously, and we've experienced what lockdown can feel like, being mindful of our responsibilities, of what we need to do to protect our freedoms in a kind of a virtuous circle, is probably a healthier mindset to drive a force for good for the collective.
I think that's right. You know, I think, you know, somebody who kind of grew up in finance, you know, we were always taught about, you know, this kind of sources and uses of funds, you know, and actually businesses, you know, we'll talk a lot in business about what we contribute. You know, we contribute jobs, tax revenues, we create great programming that inspires people, and all of that is true, and that was always true. But we also have to recognise that we also get a lot of resource for free, and we take a lot from, you know, society, from the planet, and we have to just be aware of that. And so, you know, our job is to keep that in balance. And in a sense, that's what this whole idea of a zero carbon economy for the country, that's essentially what it's about, you know. So that will only be achieved if broadly, every business, gets on board. And I think that's something that we should aspire to. And my experience at Sky is if you go on that journey, that actually the benefit that you get from that far outweighs any of the costs of actually acting.
And if we're sitting here, Edinburgh TV Festival 2030, cross the finishing line with your team, what would it look like?
Well, I'd hope what it would look like would be that we've achieved what we set out to achieve. Hopefully a wee bit early, but we've done that. That we're celebrating that and we're feeling good about that, and that there are many people. Success should have many authors, and there are many people part of that journey and feeling good about that. But also, I hope that the next goal will be firmly in place, and that we will not see that so much as a destination, but part of a journey. And that we'll be talking about being, carbon positive, and what does that mean? And so there will be this sense of renewal in a positive way, for Sky, and that the journey never ends. But this is all part of how do you build, a sustainable business for the long term.
And just finally, really reflecting on all that you've shared with us, what would your kind of be industry take-homes to sort of share with the audience today as the things that you've learnt, that you feel, that you hold true to day in, day out, to keep you focused on your vision and your actions?
I think I'd say, have an optimistic and positive mindset. We can change this. There is time. There's always enough time if we start right now. Secondly, make it a core part of what the company's about. Demand it. Be bold in your objectives. If people will get on board, it will be my experience. And thirdly, I would say, open and share. Man never really solved a complicated problem in his life. So the idea that I'm going to solve that is just not going to happen. The way it will get solved will be by breaking it down into thousands of small actions and just working that issue and getting more and more people involved. And that requires a very open mindset. It requires a collaborative mindset. It requires you to be willing to learn and to change. But I think if you can do those things and really follow those things over a long period of time, they are the keys, I think, to success. And then the final thing, I guess above all of that, is we've got to use our voice. We've got to be willing to speak, whether that's on screen, whether that's with great content, whether that's in events like this, in the right way, not hector, not lecture, but to use the power of a voice. Because when all's said and done, the one thing that this industry stands for, more than anything else, is the power of storytelling, of content, and of voice. That's our greatest asset, I think.
And the importance of having a CEO, group chief exec for Sky that holds that vision, sets the kind of vision and the agenda, because for all of us that are working in the industry, we're measured in terms of how great's that film, different metrics. I think one of the intangible things with all of us getting to grips with it is how do you measure success and feel that your actions are making a positive difference. So kind of, I guess, I would say that from looking across to all that you and your team have achieved, having that kind of being the guardian of that vision is also a very important part of the kind of success, along with us all feeling empowered to do our bit to make a positive difference.
I think that's right. I think when all of us kind of look back at what we've done and achieved, I think, the numbers will be, the financial numbers will be a small part of that picture, I think. I think, how great to say there'll be a whole set of other things alongside that that we've put in place and feel good about. What's not to celebrate there.
Well, that's the perfect ending on a celebration.
Great.
Thank you very much, Jeremy.
Much,
it's
Wendy.
been a real pleasure, and for your insights and inspiration, and I hope they travel far.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.